So, of course, we've seen the issues with Ukraine and Russia, which was your highlight, and so the story is, you can give us the backstory about that.
Okay, I haven't read so much onto it because I was trying to figure out what has happened, but it just seems like, to me, and you can edit this out. President Putin is just upset with how Ukraine is handling its matters, its relations with other countries.
Absolutely.
That's just basically what is the problem right now.
Yes.
But there have been historical issues which have just unraveled based off of now Ukraine wanting to join NATO and now having the backing of other first world countries like the US. So it's just that those are just unraveling issues. And then Kenya is sitting there.
Why are you laughing? But we're a serious country. Why are you laughing?
Yeah, so now that's how I'm seeing it. And as I say, this conflict is historical. It hasn't just happened. And it's just that it's been highlighted by the international media houses. There are many more conflicts that are happening, ongoing at the same time as this, that are not being as highlighted. And that's why I've not really focused on it. It's just that it was being highlighted, it's been the talk of the week. But in all honesty, when you look at it in aggregate, there are many other conflicts that are ongoing. So,
and we'll get into that.
Why do they focus on it? Yeah.
So, I mean, Ukraine was part of the former Soviet Union, which Russia was, of course, one of the biggest players in the Soviet Union during the times of Stalin and all those people. Now, after the collapse of the Soviet Union and all that, so these countries became, sort of like independent and ran their own things. So as she's mentioned, NATO. So for some of our listeners who don't know about NATO is, I think, the North Atlantic, something. Yeah, so it's like a coalition of sort of like it's a military alliance actually. The US being one of the biggest players. You have France, Germany, you have the UK and some other European countries. So if you look at the map, Ukraine is just next to Russia. Okay, and there's a part of Ukraine. I don't know if I should say the part of Ukraine or the part of Russia. No, according to the Kenyan statement, a part of Ukraine called Crimea, which is a contested region, and of course that is one of the issues that now we are having, Russia invading Ukraine, and also the fact that Ukraine has really been close to NATO, and they was in the process of joining NATO. Big players, with the United States, and Russia, of course, hasn't been happy with that, and now the invasion of Ukraine happened, I think, on Thursday, and Safaricom, I think they took a hit of around 5.7 Kenya shillings, something around that, 5 shillings and 70 cents. The stock went to as low as, no, that's actually a percentage.
It's
a percentage.
I was shocked. I was like 10% the stock. You can't move up or down 10%.
Because it went to 34, I think 34.5. That was on Thursday. It closed on Friday, 25th, I think at around 36.5. So it went up kidogo. And then the stories of the dividends coming, and Safcom guys were like,
good.
At least it's not.
There's a time at 45.
Yeah. And I remember you bashing someone for exiting at 42.
Look where you are.
I know people who invested at what? It was like 5 and 750 shillings.
Yeah.
And that's back in the day,
That's back in the day when Paul joined. Safaricom, I think, is only stock in my opinion that makes sense. And you've invested from before.
And the numbers actually, because it's the largest company in terms of market cap at the NSE, and I think 68, if not 64% of the wealth is in Safcom. So the NSE took a beating, I think 92 billion.
And you're correlating that?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Why are you correlating it?
Yeah.
With Safcom.
With Russia.
With Russia. Yeah. So it's actually as a result of it.
How?
Yeah, because 92 billion was shed at the stock market.
There has to be some fundamental. Okay, tell me some fundamental reason.
Now look at it this way. You know, there's never fundamentals when it comes to these things. Look at it this way. I was actually looking at the numbers globally, and it's not just Kenya. I saw even Bitcoin took a beating, and it actually went up, of course, yesterday. Nasdaq, the same thing. If you look at the S&P 500.
But those are international.
Dow Jones.
Okay, that's...
Why Safaricom?
Why Safaricom? This is in Kenya. We're here.
It's...
This is like a village on a globe.
Yeah.
I don't know the fundamentals, but the whole NSC took a beating.
Okay, you can imagine. Okay, with S&P, and when you're looking at the other,
Dow Jones,
the other stocks, it's more of sentiment,
Yeah.
and because there are major investors, international investors who invest there, it's a sentiment issue.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily to do with, I don't know, it's sentiment based.
Okay.
But here in the country, we don't really move with sentiment. We are
No.
not sentiment based.
Oh, numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you want to make the argument that Safaricom is in Ethiopia and not Moscow. Now, but look at it this way. The notion at that time was actually that when Russia attacks Ukraine, that's going to be the spark of the Third World War.
Sentiment back. We're back on sentiment.
And that
yes.
sentiment is actually the BAOS in Kenya responded to that sentiment.
You're too far.
Yeah.
Then how can you explain the
That's
92 billion loss?
I think
on that
I
particular
think
day?
we should look at the trends and see other factors, other things, not on that. That's just one item that affected the global scale on a sentiment factor of that World War III concern.
Yeah.
But based here in our little village,
I mean, look at it this way.
our little village, I don't think so.
Okay, look at it this way. Granted, 70% of the investors in NSE are external investors.
External or institutional?
Okay,
External,
no,
largely
foreign
institutional.
investors.
So they're
foreign investors,
they are
70%.
foreign investors. So since these same foreign investors are the guys who are invested in Nasdaq, so in their decision making, why would they leave out Kenya?
As
They
I
should
said-
actually inject more capital to Kenya, because here's where the risk is not.
Remember, you guys sent a message to Putin, eh?
As I said, we look at it also from a numbers perspective.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the foreign and the local investors, yes,
Yeah.
the percentages are true, 70-30, that's where we more or less balance. But then when you're looking at it just on a composition base, we also have to look at whether it was a net outflow or a net inflow, which I don't have the stats for. It's important to back everything that you're saying with
exactly.
stats, because if there was a huge net outflow, perhaps you can explain it based on what you're saying. We
Perhaps.
just need to look at those statistics, which you can catch us on the next show.
Yeah,
And we have those
you'll have the
statistics.
numbers. So, I mean, you're making a fair point that perhaps there could be other factors outside the sentiments that really brought out this 94 billion loss on that particular day, which, of course, yesterday, on Friday, it picked up a bit.
I'd say the correlation is very weak.
Oh, really?
Very weak.
I personally, I agree with you.
You know, Dan Kalia is normally the conspiracy theorist on this show, but I think
No, you're
today
feeling
I'm the conspiracy theorist. But now I'm looking at now the particulars of the now Kenya, Ukraine and Kenya Russia relations. And if you look at the trade that we do export a lot of fresh fruits to Russia, you know, and Russia is actually not that far, because we even share the same time zone. You know, the time in Saudi Arabia, Russia and Nairobi is we're in the same time zone. So now looking at that export that we do there and looking at will it be affected, I'm also looking at wheat. Wheat is big business when it comes to Kenya and Russia, because we import wheat of around 14 billion in a year, which accounts to 30% of the wheat that we consume here in Kenya. So that's big. So probably that might be affected. There was a huge conversation about oil. I'm sure you saw about that with the barrel, you know, going past the $100 mark per barrel. But then now it went down. I think when I was checking today morning, I think it's around 92 per barrel. And this is simply because the US said that they're not going to put sanctions on Russian energy products. So like the gas, the oil, so that because the derivatives, the futures actually, if you look at the futures in the UK, in the US, oil was going to another level. So I was expecting that probably in the next 1 month oil in Kenya prices are going to go high, but then that decision of the US is probably saving us.
Was it a decision or they just coiled their tails? Because Putin was like, if you guys do this, we are going to limit he threatened to weaponize the exports, which is the bulk of it is
Yeah,
oil.
I mean, if you look at Europe, 40% of
It's actually 50.
LPG or 50% of LPG.
for fuel. I don't know. I
No,
don't know about LPG.
About LPG
Yeah.
actually comes from Russia.
Yeah, and 50% of fuel comes from oil comes from Russia.
Oh, okay.
So if Putin coughs, man, you have to listen.
Do we really have to listen?
You know, when you're looking at it even from oil, again, it's demand and supply. And Russia is part of OPEC plus.
Absolutely.
Supply,
So as you said, if they limited their exports,
Yeah.
that's the supply which would go down. That's
Yes.
the reason why
So price is
the
gonna
price
hike.
went up. So the idea was, if there's going to be an issue, a conflict between Russia and the US, and this is ongoing, and Russia now retaliates and
Yeah.
now caps
Yeah.
their exports of oil, it means that supply would go down. And thus, there'll be a huge deficit because they're part of OPEC plus.
Yeah.
And then the price of oil just shot up based on that assumption.
Yeah.
But now on that realization, like things are going to smooth over, maybe it's not going to be too much of a problem. That's the reason why there seems to be some normalization on oil prices. That's how you look at it. You also mentioned on, is it wheat?
Wheat.
Yes,
Wheat as well.
Yeah.
You know, the conflict is in Ukraine. It's not in Russia. Unless the other countries retaliate against Russia
Yeah.
and now hit Russia.
Because currently the war is in Ukraine. Eh?
It's in Ukraine.
Hadn't thought about that.
The war is in Ukraine, not on Russia. As you look at those statistics on, I don't know, the strength,
Yeah.
the army
Military,
strength.
yes.
Russia dominates
Yeah,
Ukraine
by a long
it's
shot.
by a long shot. So they're the ones who are suffering at this particular point. But in terms of Russia, if there was any sanction on us, I don't think they would retaliate against a small village. A small village, they'll be like, what's the point?
So you guys normally you normally brag about Kenya being the hub of East Africa, but then now today we are a small village.
No, compared to those, we are a village.
Plus, you're comparing military power.
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
Bro,
Of course
we don't
we
stand
are.
a chance.
No, but we have allies.
Who's your ally?
The US. That's why we even made that
The
statement.
one who can be threatened by oil sanctions. Oh, please.
No, I mean, for me, my biggest concern was actually in oil. Because I'm looking at the numbers in Kenya. Currently in Nairobi, I think petrol is around 129 and diesel is 110. Without the subsidy that the government is giving, oil is at petrol is at 144
Even
and
LPG.
diesel is 133.
Yeah.
Now with the subsidy, it takes it down. But then I was wondering now, another, significant increase in the global oil prices, the government subsidy can't do anything then.
Yeah. I don't think the pool of funds in the subsidy program is quite, the fuel levy, petroleum
Development levy, yeah.
development levy. It is actually quite substantial because of all the taxes.
Yeah,
going to it,
yeah.
the levies that go into it. It's quite substantial, but there's only so much that they can be able to cushion us from.
Yeah.
So like you say, if you're already, nowadays I don't even look at when I'm feeling my at this point.
You just like fill it up, fill it up.
No. I'm going to become like every other Kenyan.
Yeah.
You have standardized your cost. You say you're going to use 1,000 bob, 2,000. That's the
yeah.
cost that you're going to go there. Work at 2,000.
Shock on you.
Actually, you don't even know how much is it. 2,000.
How many liters? Just 2K.
2K. That's the budget because at this point incomes are quite constrained. At this point.
Absolutely, yeah.
In any case, like you've just mentioned, regardless of whether income is constrained, and I think you're going to mention it again with the LPG.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether incomes are constrained, you still have some usage. You still have to utilize some of this. You still have to use your car. Unless there's some people who are so used to using their car, they can't use public transport.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so you still have to use your car. That's the reason why I would imagine even fuel sales, in terms of the numbers, not the quantum of sales has not changed.
Yeah.
Maybe the value
Yeah.
may have the value has gone up, but the quantum of sales may have remained a bit
Relative
sticky.
the same, yeah.
The volume, like you still find 10 people still going to the fuel station. Yeah, but in terms of other things, your incomes are so constrained, whereby you keep your budget as it is, and whatever that can fit into that budget is what you'll spend.
Yeah.
So if you have a budget of 10,000 to use, you'll use 10,000 regardless of whether you're going to use
enough.
one apple or two apples.
Yeah.
You're going to use that 10,000 as it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to the issue about Ukraine and Russia, and for me, if there's anything that we really don't need now, is World War III.
Definitely.
We really don't need that.
Yeah.
Of course, from a human perspective, we don't need people to die. Also, the economy. No. Just hold off. We definitely don't need a WW3. Now, what do you guys think? For me, I really hope that the interventions that will be coming in will be non-violent interventions, because if NATO decides now to sort of retaliate because this is one of their ally, Ukraine, then we're going to have a full-blown war.
World War III.
Yeah, and we really don't need one. I for certainly don't need one, because do you know what? This is quite far-fetched. Okay, but you see, for us Africans, look at the Second World War.
Yeah.
It's our grandfathers who are being drafted to go for war. So I'm saying no. I don't need no.
You're not ready.
I'm not ready. But
Already Ukraine have told the men between 18 and 60 can't leave the country. Just 18 and 60.
Everyone.
They can't
But you know
leave
what?
the country.
But you know, patriarchy is bad.
Yeah.
Does that mean that women are not capable?
But let's not move.
all you need is a gun.
So now, anyway, when you're looking at it from that point of view, yes, we don't need World War III. But I think President Putin is looking at it as a simple solution.
Yeah.
Just don't put them in it. Don't have this discussion with these guys. That's how he's looking at it. And he's thinking to himself, why is this so difficult? And I think the reason why he retaliated is because of the historical issues that they have. And it's just unraveled. And he cannot understand why such a simple thing to him. Why are you entertaining this conversation? That's what I think he's feeling. And he's
So he just wants to send a message?
He's I think that's sending a message. But also, it's just like you and I. If you have an issue, if you have an issue that arises right now, and one of you has held a grudge for so long, one of us has held a grudge, it's going to unravel. It will come out at that particular time. So it's not going to be the issue of NATO right now. It's all the other issues that are coming out at this particular point, and that's why he's retaliating as he is right now. Just because of this simple thing that could have been stopped. He's retaliating right now. And I think if that NATO conversation just dies down, everything will be sorted.
But see, the Ukrainian president.
You can't say his name. You can't.
I'm not going to try. I'm going to try to say his name. But he's also very anti-Russia.
Yes.
So that does not help. Yeah. So I don't know how that would pan out with regards to this being solved amicably. Because the guy is like out to show Putin that, you know what, you're not going to tell me what to do.
The US has actually offered to evacuate him, but he said no, he's leading the military there. He said he's not leaving Ukraine.
Look at that.
So, as a Republican...
It's about pride that it is about economic fundamentals.
I'm actually thinking it's Putin's ego on the line. But then as a Republican, for once, I'm happy that Trump is not sitting on that seat. If he was sitting on that seat...
Wait, you said as a Republican?
As a Republican, yeah.
Oh, you're a Republican?
I'm a Republican.
Oh, that's the hat.
But then, I know if Donald was sitting there, and probably the American troops would be on their way to you.
But I had him... I saw on Twitter, him praising Putin, what he's doing.
I know they're friends.
They're friends.
I'm a Republican, but I'm not a fan of Trump.
Okay.
Interesting stuff. Wow. So now, so for guys this week, that Ukraine and Russia is our stock of the week. We suspended the stock of the week because this has been a very, very big topic. It shook even the NSC. Of course, they have not agreed, but